whether we're promoting somebody from within or we're going external to bring a leader in, a manager in, or a director in, we look for the same characteristics.
And I have an opinion that I believe that most people, on average, they want to be managed, right? Like people want leadership.
It has to start with leaders and hiring great leaders. If you've identified great leaders, you train them up, you love them up professionally, they will then in turn go out and identify great talent.
The Talent Tide podcast is sponsored by Endeavous. Endeavous is a full-service recruiting firm offering a broad range of solutions from professional contracting to retained and contingency search to recruitment outsourcing. Endeavous prides itself on its core values of being bold, accountable, help-first, passionate, and results-driven to ensure the talent we bring to our partners matches their core values and overall mission. For more information, please visit endeavous.com. That is ENDEVIS.com. Hello and welcome to the Talent Tide podcast, the show that ensures you have the information you need to adapt and evolve your workplace culture as you ride the wave of change in talent management. I'm your host, Chris Nichols, and today we're chatting with a special friend of mine, Bill Fagan of the Aspire Group, and we're going to have a conversation about training and development, startup life, and just how to take a company from the grassroots organization to 12 years later, hired 1,200 people, etc. So I'm really excited about having Bill on. Welcome to the show, Bill.
Chris, thanks for having me and love what you've done with the podcast and big fan.
Yeah, thank you, Bill. I appreciate it. First and foremost, I wouldn't be here without people like Bill. My first company out of grad school was the Aspire Group, which is Bill was actually the very first employee at the Aspire Group. He started the Fan Relationship Management Center, the very first Fan Relationship Management Center at Georgia Tech, all the way back in 2009. Today, he is the CEO of Aspire. He has overseen the hiring of over 1,200 employees. He currently oversees all 37 FRMCs across the United States, generating over $1 billion in new and incremental partner revenue, serving iconic sports properties such as the NFL, the Los Angeles Chargers, San Francisco Giants, the University of Kansas, among many others. Prior to joining Aspire, Bill was a sales manager with the Charlotte Bobcats. He was the NBA Rookie of the Year in sales with the Phoenix Suns. He spent time in Canada with the Canadian Hockey League. The guy's been everywhere. He's lived all across the United States. And most recently, he completed his MBA studies at Emory University in Atlanta and was named to the best and brightest Poets and Quants, top 20 Executive MBA Programs in the United States. Bill, is there anything that you haven't done in the last 15 years?
Been on this podcast.
Well, we're changing that today. So one of the reasons I was so excited to have you on is because throughout my career, I've constantly come back to my time at Aspire and what it's meant to me professionally. And whenever I advise companies, I'll be honest, I take a lot of what I learned at the Aspire Group and share it with companies about how to train and develop and how to hire. So it started from scratch, though, a long time ago with you and a couple of other folks. So can you tell me what it's been like for you to be the first hire at an organization and to ascend to where you are in kind of a short, I guess, 3 to 5 minute spiel, if you don't mind?
Yeah, Chris. And imitation, they say, is the sincerest form of flattery. So we'll send you the invoice later for all those things you continue to borrow. But it's been a wonderful ride. The image on your podcast is the tidal wave, and we've had a lot more ups than downs over the past baker's dozen of years. And prior to Aspire, I worked in pro sports, as you mentioned, and it's a very different environment from the perspective of very structured. Everything is pretty well established, household brands that you're working for one individual team typically. And when I had the opportunity to learn what Aspire was doing and being the first at something, which was first ever outsourced ticket sales provider in all of college athletics, and looking at it from an entrepreneurial lens and say, if I could figure out with the great leaders that I was joining, Dr. Bernie Mullen and Bill Duffy at the time, the co-founders, that this could be repeated. And the issues, the challenges that Georgia Tech faced in terms of attendance for their athletic events and getting new fans in the stadium was not unique to that one institution. This is a global challenge of, how do you fill every seat in every venue for every live entertainment experience? And so, but first we had to get the first one right. And that's that number one thing was hiring the right people. And so I was attracted to the business because of the leadership and because of the opportunity to do something that had never been done before. And our intention was to grow it over time as long as it would continue to work. And we grew within the first year. We added a second, a third, and a fourth location where we were supporting ticket sales for 3 professional teams. And then after that, it was hockey stick growth, where the publications in our industry started recognizing what we were doing, and outsourcing actually can work if you have the right partner. And we found our little niche within this industry. And as the landscape has evolved, one thing that's remained the same is everybody continually needs to drive revenue because expenses are going up. And if we can provide the support, the staffing to do that, and our expertise and focus, then that's what we continue to do. And so it's been fun as the company's grown. I've grown with the company, and as opposed to just managing one individual location, now obviously overseeing the day-to-day business as a whole, the role changes significantly. And then we do a whole lot more than just selling tickets. So we work in strategy, and we work in data analytics, we work in digital marketing, we work in we call it relationship management. So it's fan relationships. We also do corporate relationships. And then last but not least is training and development. And those kind of 5 pillars of our business, underneath it all is performance analytics. So we measure everything we do for our partners and in each one of those verticals to say, how is it actually performing, what's working, what's not working, and then put it up there in a dashboard and say, how do we keep doing more of what's working, whether that's in talent management and our people and hiring, or if it's in our actual sales performance, or if it's in training and development, all the things we do there. So I'll pause there just to kind of set the framework of some of the areas that we're involved in.
Absolutely. And, people listening are from various different job functions and organizations. They are in various industries as well. And so I think for me, in sharing with our audience, the initial thought is, this guy works in sports. That's not comparable to my manufacturing industry. It's not comparable to my healthcare company. But what is the same across businesses are some core competencies. And it's the ability to measure what you do. And it's the ability to hire, train, and develop people. Because if you can do those 3 things well, you're going to be successful. And I think that's what I admire so much about what Dr. Bernie Mullen has achieved, and Bill Duffy, and then with your assistance and now your ascension to CEO. That's what I admire most about the Aspire Group, is that you, from the very beginning, have set the bar high and have always tried to go above and beyond the bar. So can you talk about what it was like at the beginning to start building out your plans around training and development, where your mindsets were, and how that shifted over the years as the organization has evolved?
Yeah, sure, Chris. I think they say the enemy of excellence is good or good enough, and I think that very much is never being complacent, even when you're having your best days, whatever that may mean in your own industry. But really, we operate a business. It's a small business that has, at its peak, had a little over 200 employees, full-time employees, and representing, as many as 40 properties at one time. And servicing that kind of pipeline effectively there's no playbook for that. And so that's why that in those early years, it was so important. And Bill Duffy would tell me this constantly in the first year is codify everything you do, meaning take notes, document anytime you have a new training module or there's a new system that you're installing. And if it's working, document it because we want it to be repeatable. And I think that's applicable to many areas of business. And so because there wasn't that playbook already written, we had to lean on our own personal experiences. And so I had been trained as a sales professional. And so building literally the playbook of how to teach people how to sell, how to service, build relationships, that was a big part of those early years is actually codifying it. Same thing when we got to the point of being around 100 employees, we realized we need a dedicated HR function. And so we hired an HR manager for the first time. They came in, there were all of the HR tools and performance measurement systems that we have today. They had to build that. And certainly I was helping kind of co-build that alongside them, even though that wasn't my expertise. And just as in many other areas of the business. And so I think it was always important and still remains true today that we try to document everything we do and systematize it so that we can repeat it, whatever that challenge is. And so when we're looking at, when we're on a call and somebody says we don't have a marketing plan for how we're going to drive revenue, we can work with them on building that marketing plan. And then we can also work with them on actually executing it. And I think so it goes beyond just the consultative approach, but it's hand in hand saying, we're going to actually help you execute this and we'll be on the front lines with you. And so you can actually bear the fruits of your labor. In terms of performance analytics, we measure every activity that all of our sales and service people have in the company. So we call it the root and the fruit on the sales side, which is to say the root is all of the activity. So how many phone calls they've made, how many minutes of time they're on the phone per day, per week, how many referrals they're collecting. We're in a referral-based business. All of that activity, how many appointments are going on, all of that root leads to the fruit, which on the ticketing side means selling tickets and actually driving revenue. And there's other metrics for other areas. But that root and the fruit we put it up transparently. So everybody in the organization can hold themselves accountable as much as we're holding them accountable to those metrics and the various goals at each location. And so when we're hiring, we're very transparent to say, you're going to be held up to this standard. And, for our leaders, hiring great leaders is the most important job because our philosophy is that A's hire A's and B's hire C's. And so starts with leadership. And we borrowed from the Disney Institute of Development, which says that if your end goal is profitability and sustainability, you don't start there. It has to start with leaders and hiring great leaders. If you identify great leaders, you train them up, you love them up professionally, they will then in turn go out and identify great talent. Those great individual contributors, well, if they're getting the right training, support, etc., and there is a career path for them, they will then provide great service to the customer, whoever that customer is. In our case, that would be a fan, somebody that's buying tickets. If that fan or that customer is satisfied, they're going to be raving fans, raving customers that they're going to buy more, probably going to refer us to their friends and family. And that means that the client, our client, in this case, the sports property, is going to be so satisfied that they're going to continue to renew our relationship and treat it like a lifetime relationship. And ultimately, that means we're probably driving revenue for all parties involved, including ourselves. And that's profitability and sustainability, but it has to come in that order. And if you try to shortcut any of those steps, starting with the leaders and then the individual contributors, the whole train comes off the tracks. And so we measure that in all of our frequent one-on-ones. So our leaders do one-on-ones with their direct reports every single week. There's training involved in every single one of those ones, and there's development involved in every one of those one-on-ones, and there's discussions about their career, not just career within the Aspire group, our organization, but career pathing for any number of directions that they may be interested in going. Just like yourself, who would have known that you would be where you are today? You're not working in our industry, but you're doing great, amazing things. And we hopefully you felt comfortable in those one-on-ones with your supervisor at the time that you could talk about that. You could talk about all of the various directions that your career could potentially go.
There was some self-ownership in that too, as I remember back. But the cool thing was that I felt free and okay to say where I wanted to be. And I don't think a lot of organizations even have a culture that welcomes that kind of conversation. So me graduating college, back up. A lot of organizations that we talk to today, when they say young people, they just want to get paid more money. They don't know, their retention is terrible. They leave after 2 years. And I look at that and say, we have to ask ourselves why. Like, why do they do that? And a lot of times it's because we're not talking to them as an organization. We don't know what they want. We don't know what they value. We assume that we can create a customized solution that fits every generation, every age group, every demographic, rural versus urban locations, and say, this is who we are. And you can do that to a certain degree, but there's also a bit of personalization that comes into play as well. And that's where true leaders, in my opinion, are able to stand out. And so from the very first time I interviewed, I was comfortable with the idea, and maybe it was even an interview question of why are you applying for this job, and where do you hope it takes you into the future? And for me at the time, I wanted to be a college athletic director. I knew I kind of had my own path mapped out. And what was amazing is that the Aspire group had a path mapped out for me as well that could assist me on my development to get towards where I ultimately wanted to be. Now that path has changed, but the things that I was able to learn during that process have allowed me to see greater opportunities that exist as well. So can you talk about what goes into hiring leaders at the Aspire group, and then identifying what traits exist that will create a leader for the Aspire group as you develop them?
Yeah, great question. And that career path, of course, was not there in year one. We were a startup company. So whether you have that kind of structure in place today, or you're in an existing organization that doesn't have it and you want to create it, there's no bad time to kind of start that. And it was an evolution. It was listening to the staff that say, I don't know what my next step is. What is the next step? And, for us, we were able to promote some people that were doing really well, give them a new title, some new responsibilities. And then as we grew, we could add additional responsibilities to those folks along the way. The number one statistic that I'm most proud of in our company's history is currently the number 70. And the number 70 represents the number of individual contributors that joined us, most of them recent college graduates that are starting their careers, and they've gotten promoted 2, 3, 4 times up to manager level. And they actually get to run their own property. And that rapid acceleration only happens because of training and development and that career path. And now it's real. We can say, I'm a sales consultant, I'm entry level, but there is a real path for me to get to a management position if that is my desire. It doesn't mean it's the only path, but there's that real path. And that's just in 12 and a half years. And if I look at most of the sports organizations within our own industry, and I look how many people get promoted in a similar path and as rapidly, it's not even close. And so there may be 1 or 2 in a typical professional organization per year, if you're lucky. And we've been able to do 70 in 12 and a half years. And so it's very real when we're interviewing and when we're hiring that there is that rapid progression and growth. So whether we're promoting somebody from within or we're going external to bring a leader in, a manager in, or a director in, we look for the same characteristics, those traits that you referenced. We call it WAP is the acronym. WHOPPPP. The W stands for work ethic, the H for honesty, integrity, and character, the O for openness to learning, P for positive attitude, P for potential for leadership, P for productivity, and P for passion and commitment to our industry and what our trade. If somebody displays those in an interview, some of those things you can literally see on a resume, others you just sort of tease out through conversation. But if somebody has WAP, we're not looking for any other experience. That's great. They are qualified for a really high qualified candidate for an interview. Now let's say they get the job offer. Now we're onboarding them. As we go through the onboarding process, we reveal to them that we're looking for WAP, and you're going to continue to be evaluated based on those 7 characteristics. We believe in it so much that it's part of our annual performance reviews. It's part of our regular performance reviews for everybody in the company, everybody. And at the end of, and as we, at month by month, we actually changed our employee of the month to be the Whopper of the month, because it's voted on by your peers. You have to nominate one of your peers, and then a committee reviews those nominations to see who best displayed WAP, those 7 characteristics in that previous month. And then there's a vote and there's a winner, and we'll put it on social media. They get a lot of praise, and it's, in our small business, it's quite prestigious, and it's a very special thing. And because it is peer nominated and it is endorsed by the leadership. And so those are little things that are contributors to building a culture that rewards not just revenue performance or, whatever the job objective is, but it's also rewarding the intangibles. And so we look for that in leaders. Past that, once they're onboarded, whether it's an entry-level position or it's at management level position, we have playbooks and guidebooks for every step of the process that can be customized at the local level to a degree. There are some non-negotiables. Everybody's going to know what WAP is. Everybody's going to know what our core values are. Those are non-negotiables. When it comes to the local job specifications, those can vary, and those can be learned quite easily. But that environment where people are, they know how they're going to be evaluated from day one. They know what the expectations are. If you do a really good job, there's an opportunity to get promoted. There's no quotas related to, we only have X number of people we can promote. There's only X number of positions that we can elevate. No, it's limitless. And working in that environment, if you have that ownership mindset, one of the things that we tell everybody on their first day is, what's that chair you're sitting in? We don't literally mean the chair, but yeah, it can. What we're looking for is, we want to empower them to treat that chair like it's their own business. Act like an entrepreneur, meaning everything that you do, not just the way you perform in terms of the results, but everything you do, you're building your brand. And that brand is going to stick with you for life. And we understand that you're most likely not going to stay with us for the rest of your career. But as the old saying goes, what if you don't train your people and they stay? Or what if you train them and they go? Well, you don't want to keep those untrained people. So we pour a lot of energy into training and development, because we hope that they get promoted internally and they continue that path. And if they do leave us, that they are prepared. They're representing not only their own brand strongly, but as an Aspire alumni, they are also representing their brand really well, just like you are.
As you were saying all that, I felt a lot of pride inside me welling up, because I was like, man, I can remember, being that young guy that got to hear all those things, and then I got to see it come to fruition, because I did take that career path. But the cool thing was, I could see where, as a sales consultant, I could see a path to being a vice president at the Aspire Group, and that was in the playbook, right? Like, that was there in front of me, and there were different routes to get to being a VP too, right? It wasn't completely linear. There were opportunities to zig and zag, and that kind of clarity for somebody that was performance oriented, who wanted to grow in their career, was so valuable for me. And I have an opinion that I believe that most people, on average, they want to be managed, right? Like, people want leadership. We reach for that. We desire it. And so the opportunities that exist in the Aspire group, I think, are wonderful. But what I think you all also do really well is that the training and development that exists immediately prepares someone for leadership. It's both manager and peer led scenarios, and I know things have changed since I was there, but the idea is that there's an Aspire way to do things, and it's kind of like a 75-25 type mentality of like us, but you get to put your own personal spin on it as well. Like you get to be a leader. You get to make small adjustments here and there to make it fit your style. And so the original playbook and then the Raise Your Game series, can you talk about how meaningful that is to the organization and what it means to your employees to be able to go through that, and why you think it remains as important today as it was 10 years ago?
Yeah, Chris, it's interesting because oftentimes we're hired to be a partner in selling tickets or something. And so there is this perceived expectation that we want to start selling as quickly as possible because that's going to lead to the most results quickest. So in that mentality, you would put a new employee on the phones or selling on day one potentially. We don't do that, even if we could. Instead, we invest in 1 to 2 weeks of training on the front end, depending on how complex what they're selling is. But most of that training is not on the product knowledge of what they're selling. The majority of it is the culture. It's around the intangibles. It's around how do you have a conversation? How do you build a relationship? How do you ask good questions? And all of the other things. And that last 10% is all the what you're actually doing, what you're selling or representing on that day to day. And so and then maybe by the end of the second week, they're starting some early sales processes, but they're definitely not being thrown in the deep end. It's very much a gradual learning process. Then they're off and running, but it doesn't stop. Every single week there's training led by the local manager. It's supported by our central VP of training who supports all of our employees. We're the only organization in our industry that has our own in-house trainer. And he owns training and development for us. But that doesn't mean he's doing all the training. A big part about what he's doing is training the trainers, meaning the managers, and empowering them with the right tools to reinforce the messaging and make sure that we're holding everyone to the same standards across the way. Every month, our employees are required to actually participate in typically a 1 to 2 hour long training session. And that's called the Raise Your Game Executive Development Program. We created this from scratch, and there are modules that rotate. So it takes about 2 years to go through the whole program. And if you're doing on average one a month, and they are now video based, they are applicable not just to our industry, but they are applicable to pretty much every business in the sense that, it's things like management versus leadership. That's the title of the session. And we talk through, in your own words, what does management mean to you? What does leadership mean to you? What is the difference? And we talk about how you don't have to be a manager to be a leader. We have another one called the 5 personalities of managing. And that talks about not just literally managing and supervising. It talks about how managing is every direction. It's managing up to your boss, managing your colleagues, managing your customers, managing your staff if you have staff. And the 5th personality, which is managing yourself. And what does that mean in each of those areas? These are life skills. They are not strictly business skills that are going to impact today's performance per se. But these are life skills that they can carry with them for the rest of their life. It's having gone through an MBA program in the classroom. A lot of these things, they don't even teach you in an MBA program. These go beyond that. You don't get prepared in a typical organization to have these things. And so we tell our partners right up front, hey, we're going to be off the job for an hour or 2 every month, but here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to develop this staff to be in your chair one day. That may be in 10 or 20 years, but we want to prepare them for all of the wide range of skills that they could need and could benefit from as they continue to grow their career. And so we spend a lot of time in that area. And at the end of the year, what do? Hold accountability. We we make sure that every single one of those employees has received the training. We monitor what training is working and what the performance is in each of those areas. And then I'll give one other example on this training and development vertical, which is we developed a training called the Sales Swing Doctor. And we talk about, the best golfers on the planet. Even the best golfers on the planet have a golf swing coach, and they're the best at what they do. But even they have a coach. So the message is everybody can continually improve. So we've taken that analogy, we've moved it to 18 modules, like 18 holes of golf, and each one is a different stage in the sales process. And they're measured and scored. They do a self-evaluation, and then the manager will do an evaluation of them. And it's all built around these short 3-5 minutes, which is about the attention span of the average person for a training session these days. So it's not a full hour or two. It's very short videos or short interaction with the leader, and then they're actually getting to evaluate themselves, and the manager evaluates them, and then you compare the scores. Anywhere where the scores don't match, there's a room for conversation, and that's the fun part. Anywhere where the employee is where there's a low score, regardless of who gave it, that's room for conversation. So and then that conversation is a training-based conversation. How do we get better? How do we work on this together? And over time, what happens is you refine those skills, and the swing gets a little smoother and a little smoother, and you're never going to be perfect, but there's continuous improvement. And same with our training. The modules that we had five years ago even are not identical to what we have today. So we're constantly modifying them to the modern techniques and what we do as an organization.
I love that, Bill. And I know we're short on time here today, but what I often see when we're advising our clients is that they lack they lack the ability to train the manager. They have great programs. They think big, but it's the ability to carry it out downstream from corporate to individual contributors and team leaders in manufacturing facilities and staff managers for RNs. So to kind of finish this thing up today, what is your best advice to organizations that would like to be able to either expand their current training and development to maximize its usage and its effectiveness, or to organizations that are looking to implement one?
Great question. I think, for us, it's and for those listening, you've got to be authentic, and it's got to be real. Meaning, if it's a web-based portal that someone is logging into with no interaction because they're required to go through a certain type of training, whether it be harassment or discrimination training, for just as a simple example, that can be very mundane and it can be forced. And understandably, those things can be required in organizations. We do those things too. But the question is how do you make the training really engaging and custom to the audience? And it's little things like keeping it short and sweet, but having ways to measure it. And so knowing who in your organization can be the cheerleader or owner of that content. It may or may not fit within HR. In our organization, training and development is related to HR. They're friends, but it's not. It's its own division. It's its own individual pillar. And so it's embedded with everything we do. And if you're an organization that is not, and it doesn't have the expertise, there's organizations like ours and many others that can come in and provide that type of training, provide those kind of the framework that can set you up for sustainability and success in this area. Because a one-off training session is like going to a conference retreat. It's great while you're there, could get some nuggets out of it, but then you're back to the old ways when you get back to the office or the virtual office. This has to be sustainable. And so everything that you're doing is it intentional? Is it repeatable, and who's going to own it? And can it become an organizational strength so that as you have turnover, God forbid your trainer was to leave the organization, do you lose the training? And if the answer is yes, that's very vulnerable. For us, everyone's a trainer or being trained, and so it's part of the culture. And so I think considering that as you're building out the framework is also of value.
Love it. And I love that you said the words, that you said the word intentional, because in order to carry out anything in business or in life, to create change, you have to be intentional, no matter what it is that you are doing. And so thank you for mentioning that word. It's one of my favorite words in business, and extremely valuable to this conversation as well. So you gave me a little bit of an opportunity to do a segue here. If organizations are looking to have a conversation about this, how do they reach out to Bill Fagan, the Aspire Group, to learn more about how to get better at training and development?
Yeah, my inbox is wide open on social media, on Twitter at Bill Fagan. Also, our website, theaspiregroupinc.com. There's an opportunity to connect with us there, and while we started in sports, we work with many non-sport properties as well, because we find that the challenges are more similar than they are different. And so when it comes to whether it's forming your own mission, vision, and values, or looking at building out your own capabilities and then communicating those and the messaging and the marketing to support that, we spend a lot of time in our strategy, analytics, and marketing function supporting external organizations in that respect. And so the fun stuff, the fun things on our website are the things for many people that are affiliated with sports and entertainment and such, but the business challenges are ubiquitous, and that for me as a business person, that's what really fires me up. I like to be a sports fan on my spare time, but for the rest of the days, I really just enjoy the business side of it.
Solving problems
and building it with people.
Yeah,
solving problems.
That's what I appreciate so much about the Aspire Group. And I'll be honest, if you have any interaction with me ever, much of who I am from a business person is because of the Aspire Group. So if you have that doubt about they're a sports company, I can promise you it's the information that they can give you and teach you is far more transferable than just around ticket sales. So reach out to Bill and the group at the Aspire Group and have a conversation with them about how they can help. That's a wrap on another episode of the Talent Tide podcast. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and rate wherever you watch or listen to us, from Apple to Spotify to YouTube. And remember, success is on the other side of fear. Talk to you soon.